today I wanted to do a lesson that is, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Alexander method.
Yes.
Yeah, so this would be, I think, described as Moshe's homage or tribute to FM Alexander. The lesson is very, it's so subtle. It's like watching paint dry. I'm actually thinking of entitling the lesson "Watching Paint Dry." So I might not be able to even tell if you're moving. And the lesson continues without a break, without a pause, without an official sanctioned pause. So if you need to rest at any moment or change positions, then please do so. But this is a lesson that continuously moves in one direction and using different points of reference. So let's get started by standing up. Let's get started by standing up, and I will hide myself so I can see you bigger. There we go. And notice how your standing is this morning. And I should mention now, while you're on your feet and more mobile, at some point the lesson will come onto the belly with the face down. So you might want to have handy a folded up towel or a little pillow if you need such a thing, for perhaps under the chest or between the breasts, because we'll be lying on the floor with the arms overhead in a comfortable position, long, whatever works for you. I know everyone has a different situation, but I think the lesson will be a lot easier if you, for some of you, if you have something handy to maybe place under your chest or forehead, so that the back of your neck can be long and you can rest with your face on the floor. So we'll just, if you need to take a moment to get that, you can always just crumple up your mats also underneath you. So we want to create a feeling of length in the entire spine. So just standing as you are, just notice where you are in your room and in your space. Can you tell by simply sensing without turning around and looking, how far your backside is from the wall behind you? Of course, you can see how far the front of you is from the wall in front of you, but how far is the wall behind you from your back? And how far is the right side of the room, your wall, from your right side? And how far is the left side of your environment from your left? Without looking, just sensing. You know, we have these sensors in ourselves. We can feel, blind people can feel this very, very well. And then if you were to drop a plumb line through the top of your head, where would the little pointer be pointing on the floor? Would it be right in the middle of your feet, or would it be closer to one leg than the other? And maybe the line, maybe the plumb line doesn't even pass straight through you. Or maybe it's not in the middle. And then go ahead and lie on your mat. We'll come back to this idea at the end of the lesson. So have your legs long if that's comfortable, and have your arms down by your sides with the elbows a bit further apart than the hands. So the palms will be down and the elbows will be wider than the palms in a way that's comfortable. So the palms are not further away from your body than your elbows, but your elbows are further away from your body than your hands. So you can feel that imprint on the floor. And just begin the smallest beginning of movement. Just begin to think about breaking contact with your hair from the floor. And how you do that. So it's such a small movement. It's such a small movement. But you feel the head getting ready. You're getting ready. How do you organize yourself to just lift the back of the skull away from the floor a fraction? A fraction. Maybe someone could slip a piece of paper under it. But feel what happens through yourself. And is that movement more, do you feel that you lean more to the right through the chest, the back of the chest or your pelvis, or more to the left? Or are you right in the center? So continue just thinking. It's more really a thought. Thinking of lifting the head. And listen from the top of the head down through the spine. Listen from the top of the head down to the right heel. From the top of the head down to the left heel. You continue to just break contact with your skull from the floor. And how do you breathe as you engage with yourself to lightly pull the head away from the floor? Do you breathe out or do you breathe in? Do you not breathe at all? Let's just see what you do. And then could you take one of your hands, it doesn't matter which one, and grab hold. We all have hair here. Yes, we all have hair. This is a requirement for the lesson. And take hold of a few strands of hair at the top of your head. So if you were a Christmas ornament, where would the hanger be? And very lightly begin to continuously pull your hair until you start to feel the scalp stretch. And you can feel, perhaps you can feel, you begin to feel something happening with the skull. The skin, the hair pulls the scalp pulls on the right side, on the left side, right out the top of your head. And it's a well, you have to rest as you need to, but it's a feeling of a continuous pull. And listen to, maybe you feel something happen in the relationship of the back of the head to the floor, and maybe you could even get a sense of connecting through to your neck, through to the skeleton, through to your spine. These are things to listen for. It's a continuous, persistent pull. Maybe try with the other arm. Give this arm a rest and try pulling with the other side. And think of that plumb line now going through you the other way. Through you the other way. And just listen. What happens? Is your head in the middle? Is it lean more to one side? Can you find a place that's just spot on, bang in the middle? And now as you continuously pull your head, oh so gently, oh so lightly, could you then begin to lift it and set it down? And then give another pull, and as you feel the head lengthening, as you feel yourself lengthening, could you begin just to break contact with the back of the head? You could even use both arms together to find a patch of hair on the top of your head. So where you might balance. So I don't know, I know that you have some shoulder issues. Jeannie, can your hands be more on the very top of your head? It looks like they're more in the front of the hairline. Yes, where the baby's soft spot is. Yeah, right in the top. If your spine were to continue to come out your head from there. There you go. And now as you're pulling, notice how you're breathing, and then barely make a break of a contact from the floor with the back of the head. Listen through the whole self. So it's not about lifting the head. I don't want to see anybody's heads lifting. This is, if I were watching, and I am watching you, but someone else without any training for such things, they wouldn't notice that you're moving at all. They're like, this person is frozen. But you feel internally that something changes. Of course, you're breathing. I can see everybody breathing, but the movement is very small. And it's persistent, but it's not insistent. Bring your arms down by your sides with the elbows wider than your hands. So the hands will be closer to the pelvis than the elbows will be closer to the body. And sense this shape, this sort of sugar bowl arms that you have. And begin to lift think of your right shoulder blade getting wider. And again, this is more of an idea than it is a movement. So the right shoulder blade moves away from the spine, and the right side of the chest and the back gets wider. And then the front of the shoulder begins to come forward towards the ceiling, so slightly. And then you return to the place you started. And then you go again, resting as you need to. So the shoulder blade gets wider and the back of the shoulder begins to lift away from the floor, curve away from the floor. And then as you return it, can you make it smooth and slow and delicious? And just listening through your whole self as you widen the shoulder, as you bring the shoulder a little closer to the ceiling, just ever so slightly. Does that movement cause you to breathe in when you do it, to breathe out? And match the movement with your breathing, however you're breathing. So that the breath and the movement of the shoulder blade in the back and the pulling of the shoulder away from the floor are together. They're not inseparable. And then could you bring your attention to your right elbow resting on the floor? And imagine a friend, an invisible friend, comes along and they very gently slip a couple of fingers under your elbow. And they begin to lengthen your elbow away as you are moving the shoulder blade away from the spine and the shoulder a bit up towards the ceiling. So this movement of the shoulder is connected to a sense of your right elbow lengthening, but not lifting, not lifting. I can see the elbows coming away from the floor. So it's really small, really small. And now think of lifting the elbow, but because you're lengthening, the lifting or lightening the contact of the elbow comes together with the lengthening feeling, the shoulder getting wider, coming away from the floor, and the lengthening elbow, and the elbow can lift just a bit. And maybe the image of having the elbow hanging, a feeling of hanging. And what happens in your upper spine? What happens in your pelvis? What happens in the neck? Continue playing with your shoulder and your elbow, and take with your other hand the hair on the top of your head, And as you pull the hair on your head, can you lengthen the elbow and round the shoulder and widen the shoulder blade away from the back? It's not lifting. I see elbows lifting. All right, this is what, if I should be able to stare at you the whole time and not really see anything happening except your breathing. So there's a feeling of internally lengthening, and maybe the elbow doesn't even creep along the floor. It could, it might, a few millimeters. And if the elbow is lengthening away and getting lighter, what is happening with the hand? What is happening with the fingertips? And leave it, bring your arm down, and begin the same exploration on your left side. So when you begin to widen the back of the chest on the left side, so the shoulder blade comes away from the spine, and you feel the shoulder blade starting to curve forward a bit towards towards the chest, towards the ceiling, somehow with your breath, somehow with your breath. And listen to the left elbow, the left elbow. And if someone were to come along and slip their fingers under your elbow, or maybe just get hold of the shirt, of your fabric of your shirt from underneath your elbow, and begin to lift it away, that there's a feeling of the elbow getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and yes, now you can lift it away, but it's a feeling that the arm is hanging. The arm is hanging, and the lifting and lengthening are one thing. As the elbow lifts, the arm lengthens. As the shoulder slides, the arm lengthens, begins to lift. And now could you play with this with both arms together so that you get wider in the back, wider in the back, wider in the back, and the shoulder blades coming and sort of scooping, as though someone came and scooped their hands underneath your shoulder blades and started to very gently round them forward, and you feel the back of the chest getting wider and wider, and the front starting to soften and hollow out, and the arms, the elbows are getting longer, and then you can just barely lift them in a feeling of being suspended. The elbows are suspended and the back is wide. And then you return back and you pay attention just as gently, just as softly you're coming back to where you started. And the movement is part of your breathing, part of your breathing. And continue with this new arm, the left arm, and take hold of the top of your head, the hair on the top of your head with your other arm, and lengthen the head, lengthen the scalp. Listen to the connection deep into the neck, deep into the upper back, into the shoulder, and the shoulder getting wider and coming closer, and the elbow lightening, and the back of the head lifting. You're lengthening, you're lifting the head, and you're lifting the elbow, and there's a feeling of hanging. The hand stays on the floor, the fingertips stay on the floor of the left side. But you're getting longer, you're getting longer. And bring your arm down. And then begin to lift your right knee away from the floor. So the legs are long, and just how would you lift the knee? How would you bring the knee away from the floor without the heel dragging along your mat? So it's not that kind of a you bent the knee out to the side that you might feel the heel dragging towards you, but can you bring the bring the knee away from the floor in such a way that there's a similar idea. There's this idea of the thigh bone getting longer. And could you even direct your toes, the direction of your toes, so that they're a bit outwards? How do you bring the knee away from the floor, sort of this amphibious frog-like movement? And again, the movement can go with your breathing. And it's so, so, so small. Something happens in the hip joint. And can you take hold of the hair on the top of your head again? And as you're bringing the knee away from the floor, can you pull your scalp, pull the hair, pull the scalp, and listen. When would you bend your knee? What's happening? This is systemic. This moves through your whole system. Does your pelvis lean? Do you lean a little more towards the right side of yourself? And rest the arm down in the sugar pot position, and try the same thing with your left knee. Just draw it away from the floor without the heel dragging. What do you feel in the response of the ankle, of the hip, the weight through the pelvis, the weight on the back of the shoulder? And then take a hand and grab some hair, and like pulling yourself up like a Christmas ornament, something also bends the knee. You're pulling and bending the knee. Where is that? Find that connection. And there's this continuous feeling of lengthening, lengthening, lengthening. You can, of course, pause and take the hair again, pause and take the hair again so your arm doesn't get tired. So organize it so that you can do this for a long time. And now the next time you grab your hair and pull your head, could you lift your head as you brought the back of your knee away from the floor a bit? Very good, very nice. Rest your arm down, or arms down. And now could you somehow pull your right hip away from the floor, which means that the right hip joint, so that it means the pelvis will roll, and you'll mobilize yourself. How will you mobilize yourself to roll the pelvis just a teeny weeny eensy beensy amount to roll the pelvis to the left? You feel the left side of your sacrum taking more weight, but I can't see it. And notice if you're mobilizing by pushing. Do you push the heel? Do you push the right heel into the floor to mobilize the pelvis? That would be a strategy. We've done lessons like that in the past. But could you find a way to turn the pelvis by utilizing your trunk and not pressing the right heel into the floor? So how would you sort of drawing your pelvis to roll to the left? Draw your pelvis to roll to the left, and then take hold of your hair with one hand and lengthen as you pull and draw the pelvis over to the left, turning it, and you get longer. I feel that spreading from starting, and start the movement from this pulling of the scalp. The pulling of the scalp, the lengthening, the connection into the skull and the occiput and the neck, and then into the trunk, and find that, make it really a delicious experience for yourself. And then bring your arm down and move to the other side. So lift your other hip away from the floor, and you know how to do that. You know how to do that now. How do you marshal? How do you marshal your torso? What happens in your belly? You can, without needing to push from the heel. Maybe you push with the heel at first. Is there more weight in one of the elbows? Can you make the leg and the heel weightless and the arm weightless, the arms weightless? And then take hold of your hair with the top of your head if you're not already playing with that, and feel the lengthening. Now, would you also turn your head? Would you direct yourself to turn your head as you turn your torso? That might be something to play with, that everybody's going this way. If you were lying on somebody took your blanket and lifted it up and started to roll you a little, started to roll your whole, or somebody came and the house tilted. But there's a feeling of getting longer that starts from this gentle tug through the top of your skull. And bring your arm down. And sense the distance from the top of the head to the tail, from the right heel to the right hip joint, and the left heel to the left hip joint, and the top of the head to the heels, and the heels to the top of the head. And now can you lift the head just the tiniest bit? Just break contact and feel how do you marshal that? It's not something to overcome. And then please come onto your stomach. Please come onto your stomach and have your arms long and your face down. So take all the precautions you need to have a comfortable experience there. And just rest there for a moment. So the face is down, the arms are long, good, this looks good. Wherever the arms can be comfortable, if you can have them long, that's great. And now can you think of your back? Think of your back getting very wide. Think of the back of the pelvis getting very wide. And think that your kidneys, your precious kidneys, they start to get very full. They get very full, and they can start to expand backwards towards the back. Expand backwards towards the back. And then could you just very, very, very lightly lift your head? lift your head a little bit and set it down. And imagine someone has hold of your hair here, the top of the head where you've been pulling. And they begin to pull you upwards, and then you begin to lift your head. Without shortening in the back of the neck. Can you do that? Can you break contact? Can you get longer without shortening in the back of the neck? And now could you rest your head, and can you pull your navel away from the floor? Just this very specific. So it's not about contracting the abdomen and pulling the stomach away from the floor. It's so subtle. It's like there's a string somewhere in your navel, and somebody pulls it towards your back, and your navel comes away from the floor, just the navel, so the slightest bit. And as the navel comes closer to your spine, feel what's happening through the tissues of your back, through the tissues of your chest, tissues of your pubic bone. And just keep playing with drawing the navel away from the floor. And we remember, we've all done these lessons, and you certainly remember. When we pull the stomach in and the chest gets larger, could you play with that? Pulling the stomach in towards the spine very gently, very gently. And the kidneys, there they go, up towards the, floating up towards the back. And the belly button coming away from the floor, and the chest getting larger and wider. And then could you lengthen your right arm along the floor? The tiniest bit, in such a way. Think of lifting the right elbow away from the floor in such a way that the arm lengthens. You keep playing with this idea of the chest getting larger and the belly button coming up away from the floor. You might feel the fingers of your hand creeping along the floor, lengthening. Again, that invisible friend comes to lift your elbow away from the floor, and as they lift it, you lengthen. And play with the other arm. Think of the left elbow. It's lightning. That friend comes and takes hold of the fabric from underneath your elbow, and as they lift, the fabric stretches and the arm can hang. The arm can hang. The bone can get longer. The back. What happens in the back? Again, pull your navel away from the floor. Now, could you play with the idea of orient your heel? Well, notice how your heels are oriented. Are they looking away from each other with the toes closer to the midline, or are the heels closer to the midline, or are they more parallel? And can you organize your right leg so that the heel is more towards the midline and the toes are more towards the outside? And then from here, can you find a way to lift the knee away from the floor? By using your back and your buttock. Not by pushing through the foot. Again, somebody they come and they grab your trouser leg or your tights and they pull it around and away from the floor. And the knee gets lighter. What's happening in the hip? Something happens in the hip. The knee will be bent a bit. It has to be bent, but it's not like we usually do where we draw the knee out to the side and the heel comes closer to the pelvis. It's not that. And then could you make the same explorations on the other side? So you're breathing, the knee is out to the side, the heel is to the inside. Somehow you engage your back to lighten the knee. Engage your buttock to lighten the knee. Now, could you do that with both heels? Some of you already are, but could you do that with both heels looking at each other? What difference did that make to change that relationship? And now let your legs be how they're most comfortable. Can you again pull your navel away from the floor? And then could you pull the front of your chest away from the floor? And think of the back getting very wide. Pull the front of the chest. Pull the belly and expand the chest, and then bring the front of the chest away from the floor, like turning into a large toad. Or a cobra snake, a hooded cobra. You could do this with your back. And then could you take hold of your hair somehow with one of your hands, with your fingertips? And could you lift your chest away from the floor as you pull your head and you extend, you get lengthen, you get longer. Pull the chest away and you get longer, and the belly comes in and the kidneys go back, and the back gets a feeling of fullness, and you have a feeling of length. Try the same with the other hand, pulling, maybe your non-dominant hand. Find some hair and start by this tugging of the hair, the scalp, the skull, the spine, and draw the chest away from the floor and draw the navel away from the floor. And you're breathing. And it's almost as though the front of you could levitate. The front of you could levitate. away from the floor as it's a magic carpet ride. And then leave that and come onto your back. Your back. And sense your contact with the floor. And please bend your knees and stand your feet in that sweet spot where the knees are balanced over the feet. The legs are balanced and free. And can you take hold now of the hair at the top of the back of the head or the back of the top of the head? And from here, pull, continuously pulling, persisting, feeling it catch in, feeling that hook into like cars of a train, linking the head, the skull, the neck, the spine. And then could you lift your pelvis? So small, so small. You're lengthening through the head, and then you could lift your pelvis. And not in the way that we often do, which is by pressing through the feet. The feet are weightless. The feet are weightless, and you're growing, you're lengthening, and the pelvis can lighten away from the floor because the belly button, that thing you did with your belly button, pelvis comes away from the floor and you're lengthening, and then you could lift the pelvis and lift the head, but it's so small. It's so small, but you can feel the lengthening. You can feel the connection. And then could you play with, we did this at the very beginning. Oh, that's nice. I'm seeing some nice movement. Can you play with what we did our very first pandemic series lesson, which was the lifting of the right foot away from the floor in a way that was weightless. So you're lengthening, you're pulling the scalp and the top of the back of the head or the back of the top of the head, and then the right foot levitates. And what happens? Where does the weight go across the back? You can always rest as you need to. You can always change your hand. You can even play with pulling from both hands so that you have a symmetry. But try with the left foot and the left hand. The left foot and the left hand. So you're pulling the back. Now you're a little further back with the hair. The top of the back of the head, the back of the top of the head. And you're pulling the hair there. And then you lift the left foot. You lift the left foot. And you could even lift the head a little bit as you lift the left foot. But the right foot is weightless. The right foot is weightless. Feel what you do with your interior. Feel how you organize your abdomen. Feel how you draw yourself away from the floor from either end. And you set it down so precisely. You set both ends down so precisely, so lightly. I shouldn't be able to see the head lifting. There we go. There we go. That changed something. Good. Now, could you take both hands? And resting as you need to, because this is a continuous lesson, but take both hands to take the hair at the back of the top of the head, the crown of the head. Your elbows in a way that's comfortable, your arms in a way that's comfortable, because if you're not comfortable, if you're in pain, none of this works. None of this works. Your only brain is only paying attention to the pain. So as you were pulling through both hands, through the top of the back of the head, the hair, the skull, the spine, the chest, the ribs, the pelvis, and the pubic bone can come under, and the navel can draw inwards, and you can break contact, lift the head. As you're lengthening, you lift the head. You lift the head, and the feet become weightless. The feet become weightless as the head becomes weightless. And in continuously pulling, pulling, pulling. And now could you lift your pelvis and your head? Lift your pelvis and your head, and you're getting longer, and you're pulling, pulling, pulling. Lift the pelvis and lift the head. It's nothing to overcome. It's just persisting, not insisting. And lengthen down your legs and bring your arms down to rest. And sense your contact with the floor. And now in just the teeniest, simplest, lightest way, could you lift the head? Just break contact in the head from the floor. So has that quality changed? Is there something different about that from the beginning of the lesson? I can see that the position of everybody's heads has changed. The orientation of the face to the ceiling has changed for everybody. And then could you bring yourself in a continuous way to roll onto one side and to come up to standing? And sense again your orientation in space, your sense of where the wall is behind you, where the walls are to the right and to the left, to the front. And if you drop that plumb line through the top of your skull again, where does the little pointer point on the ground? What is the distance of the right leg to the line and the left leg to the line? And just recall that feeling of lengthening upwards. Nothing gets shorter in the back. Nothing gets shorter in the back. But there's a feeling of weightlessness. And could you then begin to walk around the room with this feeling of this projection of forwards and up through the head, through the spine, and there's a sense of weightlessness as you walk. You can lightly move. Light on your feet would be the term. Light on your feet. You can move forwards, you can move backwards, but you can just the idea, the sensation you had on the floor of the connection through the hairs on your head to the scalp, to the skull, to the spine, to the heels. That's an idea you can tap into, you can play with as you go, move about your day, you stop, you make your tea. That feeling of everything lighter and longer. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.